The night was quiet, cold, and dark. Eli sat on his small porch, watching the sky. He liked the peace here. Deep in the forest, far away from cities and noise, his little cabin was old but strong. With a fire burning inside and the smell of wood smoke in the air, he took a sip of tea when something strange happened. A loud boom shook the ground. Eli stood up fast, his heart beating hard. He looked up and saw a bright light falling through. The sky, it was not a star, it was bigger, and it was on fire. The object crashed deep into the trees, lighting up the night for just a second. Then all went dark again. For a moment, Eli just stood there, not sure what he saw. Then his curiosity won. He grabbed a flashlight and a jacket, and rushed into the woods. Branches slapped his face, and cold wind hit his skin, but he didn't stop. The light had fallen not far from his cabin, maybe a mile or less. He moved fast, his boots crunching the fallen leaves under his feet. Soon, he smelled something burning. He slowed down, shining his flashlight ahead. Then he saw it, twisted metal, glowing orange, stuck between trees. Smoke rose into the air, and sparks jumped from the wreckage. Eli stepped closer, eyes wide. It looked like a small ship, not from Earth. The surface was smooth and silver, and symbols glowed faintly along the side. Suddenly, he heard a sound, a soft whimper, like someone in pain. He moved to the other side of the wreck, pushing through the broken metal. There, lying half out of the pod, was a girl. She was not human. Her skin was pale with a hint of blue, and her long hair shimmered like the night sky. She had glowing violet eyes and sharp, pointed ears. She wore a torn, dark suit, strange in design, like armor and silk together, and around her neck were two small fang marks, old, faded scars. Eli froze, not sure what to do. The alien girl looked up at him, weak and shaking. Her lips were dry, her eyes dull. She tried to speak, but only a soft breath came out. Then she fainted, her head falling back into the dirt. Eli didn't think. He bent down and gently picked her up. She was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. He carried her back through the trees, holding her close to keep her warm. The wind howled around him, but he kept moving. Back at the cabin, he laid her on the couch near the fire. She didn't wake, just lay there, breathing slow and shallow. Eli covered her with blankets, then sat down, staring at her face. She was beautiful and strange, but something about her made him feel sad, like she had been running from something or someone. That night, Eli didn't sleep. He kept the fire burning and watched over her. Sometimes she whispered in her sleep, words he couldn't understand. Other times, she cried without tears, her body shaking like she was cold inside. In the middle of the night, she woke for just a second. Her eyes met his, glowing weakly. Her voice was a whisper, dry and broken. "I'm thirsty," she said. Then she passed out again. Eli stood there, frozen. He gave her water, but she didn't drink it. He checked for wounds but found none. Still, she looked worse every hour, as if something inside her was fading. The next morning, the girl still hadn't moved. Her skin was even paler now, her lips turning blue. Eli sat beside her, helpless. He whispered, "What do you need?" Then, without warning, her hand grabbed his wrist. Her grip was weak, but her fingers were ice cold. Her eyes opened slightly, and she looked at him, not in anger, but in hunger. Slowly, her gaze drifted to his neck. Eli felt a chill go down his spine. She wasn't asking for water. She needed something else, something alive. The wind outside howled louder, but inside the cabin, it was completely still, just Eli and the vampire alien girl, whose thirst could no longer be hidden. Eli didn't sleep that night. Even with the fire burning warm beside him, his skin felt cold. The girl's hand had touched him only for a second, but he still felt the chill. Her eyes had looked into his like she saw something hidden deep inside him. Not hate, not fear, but hunger. She lay still on the couch, her breathing shallow, her skin pale as snow. Eli checked her again, searching for wounds or broken bones. There were none. She was Dying, but not from pain. Something else was missing. Something he couldn't give her. When the sun came up, it brought no comfort. The trees outside stood frozen, and even the birds stayed silent. Eli walked in circles through the cabin, thinking, remembering her whisper, "I'm thirsty," she had said, but when he gave her water, she didn't even open her lips. He tried soup, broth, juice, nothing worked. She didn't respond. Then he saw her twitch just once, when he accidentally cut his hand while chopping wood. It was a small cut, nothing serious, but the moment a drop of blood hit the floor, she stirred, her fingers moved, and her mouth opened slightly. Eli froze. He wiped the blood fast, his heart beating louder now. He looked at her face, her nose flared, her lips trembled, and a soft sound escaped her throat, a sound like longing. That night, Eli sat beside her again, holding a warm cloth to her forehead. Her skin was cold like ice, her body was so still. She looked like a statue from another world. He leaned close and whispered, "Please tell me how to help you." Her lips moved, but no sound came out, so he closed his eyes and said what he was afraid to say. "Do you need blood?" The fire cracked behind them. The girl opened her eyes very slowly. They glowed weakly, like fading stars. She blinked once, then nodded. Eli pulled back, unsure if he saw right, but her eyes didn't lie. She was not some monster, not some evil creature. She was just someone alone, starving and afraid to ask. He stood up, grabbed a knife, and walked into the kitchen. His hand shook as he pressed the blade to his finger. A single drop of blood ran down. He walked back to her and held his hand out. She didn't move, just stared at it. She looked away like she was ashamed. He didn't understand why, until she finally spoke. "I can't feed from your hand," she whispered. "Why not?" he asked. She looked at him with pain in her voice. "It's not enough. Not when we are this weak." It must be close to the heart. Eli understood, even though his body screamed not to. He sat beside her, slowly pulled his shirt down to reveal his neck. Her eyes widened in shock. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I know," he said quietly, "but I want to." She reached out with shaking hands, her fingers brushing his skin. She leaned in close, but stopped. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. "I trust you," Lee whispered. Then she bit. It wasn't like he imagined. There was a sharp sting, then warmth. Her lips were soft, her breath cold. But she drank slowly, carefully, like she was afraid of taking too much. Her body began to warm as she fed, her pale skin slowly turning soft pink, her eyes closed, and a quiet sigh left her mouth. She pulled back suddenly, breathing hard, her lips stained red. "You stopped," Eli said, feeling dizzy. "I had to," she said. "I promised I wouldn't lose control." He leaned back against the couch, everything spinning around him. She caught him before he fell, her strength already returning. She held him close, her arms shaking. "You saved me," she whispered. "Why?" Eli opened his eyes and smiled weakly. "Because no one else would." She didn't speak after that, just watched him as he drifted off to sleep. For the first time since she crashed, she felt full, but more than that, she felt something strange. Something new, not just life flowing through her veins, but warmth, not from blood, but from kindness. Outside, the wind howled over the trees, but inside the cabin, the silence was different now, not empty, but safe, and deep in the forest. Two souls from different worlds rested under one roof. One gave his blood, the other gave her trust. Neither knew that this was only the beginning. Eli woke to soft humming. He blinked and sat up slowly, his neck still sore from the bite. The cabin was quiet, but the warmth in the air felt different. Then he saw her, standing by the window, looking out at the trees. She wasn't pale anymore. Her skin held a soft glow, her eyes clear and sharp like stars. She stood straight, strong, no longer the dying creature he had found in the woods. She turned when she heard him stir, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. "Good morning," she said in a soft voice. "Morning," Eli answered, his throat dry. He tried to stand but wobbled, and she rushed over, catching him before he fell. "You're still weak," she said, her voice filled with guilt. "You didn't take too much," Eli said, trying to smile, but his legs disagreed. And he sank back onto the couch. She sat beside him, folding her hands tightly. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. He nodded, waiting. "I'm not just any alien," she whispered. "I'm one of the last Sangrians. My kind, we feed on life essence." Eli tilted his head. "You mean blood?" "Yes," she said. "But it's more than that. It's memory, emotion, the soul's warmth." She stood and walked around the room, her fingers brushing over the books on his shelf. "When I drank from you, I didn't just taste blood. I saw your past," she said. Eli's heart skipped a beat. "My past?" She nodded slowly. "I saw the fire. The one that took your home, your family." Eli looked away, his hands clenched. He had never spoken of it to anyone. That memory had lived inside him like a wound that never closed. "You felt that?" he asked quietly. "I lived it," she replied. "I cried with you. And after that, I couldn't keep drinking." Silence filled the cabin again, heavy and strange. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." Eli shook his head. "You didn't choose this." "I did," she said. "I refused the old ways, the dark feeding. My people call me weak for that." She turned back to him, her eyes softer now. "I came here not by accident. I ran." Before Eli could ask more, a sudden buzzing filled the room. The light bulbs flickered, and the radio crackled though it wasn't plugged in. Her eyes widened, and she rushed to the window again. "They found me," she said in a whisper. "Who?" Eli asked, standing despite the weakness in his legs. "My people," she said. "The ones who still feed the old way." Outside, something moved through the trees. Not animals, not wind. A strange, silent shift, like shadows walking without form. She turned to Eli, her face pale once more. But not from hunger. This was fear. "I have to leave," she said. "If they see you with me, they'll kill you." Eli reached for the axe by the door. "You're not leaving alone." She stared at him, confused. "Why would you risk your life for me?" "Because I already did," Eli said. "And I don't regret it." She didn't know what to say. Back on her world, kindness didn't exist without price. But here, this human offered it freely. Even now, when danger was near, she placed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat steady and brave. "You're strange," she whispered. "I get that a lot," Eli replied. A loud thump hit the roof, then another. The cabin shook slightly, and both of them looked up. She whispered her old language, then turned to him. "If I tell you how to hide, will you?" "No," Eli said. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me." For a moment, she stared at him like she was trying to understand something bigger than herself. Then she smiled just a little, a soft, tired, grateful smile. It was the first time she had smiled in years. Outside, the shadows gathered. Inside, the vampire girl and the human stood side by side, not as hunter and prey, but as something new, something unspoken. In her world, emotions were weakness, but here, in this wooden cabin, they felt like strength. And as the door creaked with the weight of something approaching, she reached for Eli's hand, holding it tight. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. The knock on the door never came. Instead, the shadows melted into smoke, slipping through the cracks of the old wooden cabin. The fire dimmed as if afraid, and the temperature dropped like winter had arrived early. Eli stood ready, his axe shaking slightly in his hand. She moved beside him, silent, her glowing eyes scanning every corner. "They're not here to speak," she whispered. "They're here to take." The smoke began to form shapes tall, thin, inhuman. Red eyes opened inside the dark mist, and voices began to echo around them, not in words, but in feelings, coldness, hunger, command. One shape stepped forward, more solid than the others. A woman, cloaked in black, her face sharp and still, like stone carved by ice. Siren, the figure said with no mouth. Just sound inside their minds. You broke our laws. Siren stood tall, though her body trembled slightly. I chose mercy, she replied. That is weakness, the figure said. You were royalty once. Now you are nothing. Eli looked between them, confused, but holding firm. You know her? He asked. The figure turned, red eyes now fixed on him. He's human, the voice hissed. You drank from him, shared your essence. He saved me, Siren said quickly, stepping between them. You bonded with prey, the figure growled. Unforgivable. The other shadows closed in, their shapes whispering with movements like smoke and shadow. Siren stepped back until her shoulder touched Eli's. He felt her fear even before she spoke. She's my sister, Siren said, barely above a whisper. Eli didn't speak, only gripped his axe tighter. The figure moved closer, her hand lifting slowly. Dark energy formed at her fingertips like liquid night. Siren didn't move, she only looked at her sister and said, You came to destroy me, but I will not fight you. The shadow hand flicked forward, and Siren flew across the room, slamming into the wall. Eli cried out and ran to her, but she waved him back. Don't touch me, she gasped. It's not over yet. She stood again, blood at the corner of her mouth. Her eyes now burned brighter than ever. She didn't raise her hand, didn't fight back. She spoke, and the room changed. I chose love, she said, and if that is death, I will still choose it. The figure hesitated, just for a second. The other shadows paused, their forms flickering. They had not expected words. They had expected fear. Eli stepped forward, standing beside Siren. You want her gone? He shouted. Then you'll have to go through me. The silence that followed was thick. Then the figure tilted her head and laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was cold and hollow. You protect her, she said. How noble, how foolish, darkness rushed toward them. Siren pulled Eli behind her and whispered something ancient. A circle of light flared around them, burning the smoke like fire to paper. The cabin walls groaned, the air shook, and the figures screamed. Then they vanished, all of them, sucked back into the night. Silence returned like a sudden breath. Fire flickered weakly, the air still cold. Eli looked at Siren, her body barely standing. You used your blood power, he said. I had to. She replied, her voice shaking. I can't use it again. Not without. She didn't finish, but he knew more blood, more of him. But he was already pale, already weak from the last time. He reached for her, and she leaned into him. You shouldn't have protected me, she whispered. I didn't know how not to, he said softly. She looked at him with eyes that didn't belong to a killer. Eyes that now held pain, love, and something close to regret. She had run from her world, thinking she could hide. But now the hunters had tasted her scent. They wouldn't stop, not after tonight. Siren had made a choice, and so had Eli. Neither of them said it, but both knew. This was only the beginning of the war between what she was and who she wanted to be. And now she wasn't alone anymore. The forest looked peaceful under the morning light, but Eli knew it was lying. Smoke still curled from the corners of the cabin, and the walls were cracked where shadows had passed through. The calm was just a cover, hiding the truth. Something had changed forever. Siren sat on the porch, silent, her hands clenched tight in her lap. She had not spoken since the night her sister attacked. Eli brought her warm tea, but she didn't touch it. She only stared into the woods, like she expected more ghosts to come walking out. He sat beside her, both of them quiet for a long time. Then she finally whispered, I never wanted it to be this way. Eli glanced at her. You mean running? She shook her head slowly. I mean being born like this. Into blood, hunger, war. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't. Sometimes silence was softer than words. She looked at him, her voice low but steady. My sister wasn't lying. I was royalty. But I gave it up. Eli raised an eyebrow. A princess vampire? She laughed once, a dry sound with no joy. No. more like a weapon dressed in silk. Her fingers brushed her neck, where ancient scars lay hidden beneath her skin. They trained me to kill without leaving marks. To drink and forget. Eli looked at her, really looked, not as a vampire or alien, but as someone lost between two worlds. You didn't seem like a killer when I found you in the woods, he said. I wasn't, she replied. I was already broken. She stood suddenly and walked toward the trees. Eli followed, unsure what she was thinking. Then she stopped and pointed to a flat rock near the river. I used to sit like this on my home world, she said. We had moons that never slept. Eli sat down beside her, the sound of water calming his nerves. Are they still hunting you? He asked. She nodded. Yes, they will come again. Stronger, angrier. He stared at the flowing stream, then at her pale hands resting on her knees. You don't have to run anymore, he said. I'm not, she answered. I'm preparing. That night, Eli helped her reinforce the cabin. They used wood, nails, anything they could find, but it wasn't enough, and they both knew it. Siren needed strength, and there was only one way she could get it. When the fire had burned low and the stars rose over the forest, she spoke again. I need your help, she said, her voice trembling. He looked at her, tired but calm. You mean blood, she nodded. I hate asking, but I can't protect us like this. Eli walked over, pulled down his shirt, and knelt in front of her. You don't have to ask, he said. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, her eyes glowing faintly. I won't take much, she whispered, just enough to wake the fire inside. Her lips touched his neck. And for a moment, there was only silence. Then the world pulsed like a drumbeat deep in the earth. Siren's breath quickened, her grip tightening. Eli felt his strength fading, but he held still. She drank with care, pulling only what she needed then. Something shifted. A bright red glow surrounded her, and her body rose slightly off the floor. Symbols appeared across her skin, ancient markings full of power. Eli's eyes widened as the room grew warmer. He saw flashes in her eyes, not just hunger, but memories, battlefields, crowns, a throne dripping with blood. She pulled away with a gasp, her hands shaking. I saw things, she whispered. Things buried inside me. Eli leaned against the wall, his vision blurry. What kind of things? A final gift, she said. Left behind by my mother. The last queen. Sealed inside my blood. He didn't understand it all, but he saw the fire in her eyes now. Not fear, not sadness, purpose. She stood tall, stronger than before, but her face was full of worry. They'll come with fire next time, she said. And not just for me. They'll burn everything. Eli grabbed her hand, even though his own was shaking. Then we'll be ready, he said. She looked at him, her voice breaking. Why do you still trust me, Eli? He smiled, pale but steady. Because you didn't run when you could have. In the silence that followed, the wind howled through the trees like a warning. But inside the cabin, something ancient had awakened. Siren was no longer just a vampire girl. She was becoming something her people feared. And they were coming to destroy her before she remembered who she really was. Asterisk. The wind carried a strange scent that night, like ash, smoke, and old metal. Eli smelled it before he saw anything. He stepped outside, and the sky was red, though there was no sun, no fire, only a soft glow rising over the distant hills. He knew what it meant. They were coming, inside the cabin. Siren stood in front of the mirror. She wasn't looking at her face. She was staring into her own eyes, trying to see the monster she had once been trained to become. But no matter how hard she looked, she saw something else now, someone who didn't want to kill to live. Someone who had felt warmth from a stranger's blood and didn't want to lose it. She turned when she heard him enter. They're close, he said. I know, she replied. I can feel them through the ground. Her voice had changed. Stronger but softer. Something old was stirring in her bones. Something she had locked away for years. Eli held up a blade made from scavenged ship metal. Not silver, but sharp, he joked. Siren smiled faintly. "Thank you, but I don't need a weapon. You are the weapon," he said, half joking, half serious. She didn't deny it. They stood in silence, waiting. Then a roar echoed across the woods, deep and wide like the growl of a dying star. The trees began to bend, not from wind, but from weight. Something massive was landing. Eli saw it first, a ship darker than space itself, falling from the sky without sound. It didn't crash, it didn't burn, it simply touched the ground and froze time around it. Out of its belly came shadows again. But this time, they didn't float, they walked in armor, with weapons that pulsed like hearts. At their center stood a man with silver skin and red tattoos across his face. He looked straight at Siren from across the field. "You opened the old blood," he shouted. "Foolish girl." Siren stepped forward, barefoot on the cold earth. "I opened truth," she said, "and I'm not your tool anymore." The man smiled, but it was thin and empty. "You are the last royal spark. I'm here to snuff you out." His arm lifted, and the warriors behind him charged. Eli stood beside Siren, shaking but firm. "I'm ready," he said. She looked at him once, her hand brushing his. "No," she whispered, "you're too weak. I've taken too much." "I don't care," Eli replied. "This is my home too." Siren's eyes flared red, then gold. She stepped forward, her body rising slightly above the ground. She didn't move like a person anymore. She moved like light. In a blink, she was among the attackers. Her hands glowing, her whipping like fire. She didn't use teeth, didn't drink. She fought with pure force blood energy in its purest form. Her strikes sent shockwaves. Her voice cracked the air like thunder. The warriors screamed, not in pain, but in disbelief. "She has the mother's flame." One cried before being thrown into the trees. But then, the silver man moved. He was faster than her. In one strike, he knocked her back, her body hitting the earth with a heavy crack. She tried to stand, but he kicked her down again. "I trained you," he said coldly. "I know your every move." Eli couldn't watch anymore. He rushed forward, swinging his metal blade. It broke on the man's armor, and Eli was knocked to the ground in seconds. The man raised his arm, a spear of energy forming above it. "You gave yourself to her," he said to Eli. "How foolish." But before the spear could strike, Siren screamed, not in fear, but in rage. Her body burst into flame, not fire, but memory, love, and pain. She threw herself between the spear and Eli, and the weapon shattered on her back. The silver man stumbled backward, burned by something he couldn't understand. "You bonded," he said, choking. "You let a human into your heart." Siren stood tall, blood dripping from her lips. "I didn't let him in," she said. "He opened the door." With one final blast, she pushed the enemy back into the ship. The ground cracked, light poured from her chest, and the silver man vanished inside the flame. When it ended, the ship was gone, the field was empty, and Siren collapsed beside Eli, her body cold, her breath shallow. Eli crawled to her, holding her face in his hands. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please." She looked at him, eyes fading. "I need more," she whispered. "But I don't want to hurt you." "You won't," he said, pulling her close. "Take what you need." And once again, under the stars, a human gave his life so that something older than time could remember what it meant to feel. The snow fell quietly that morning. Thin flakes drifted down like pieces of forgotten dreams. Ale lay on the cabin floor, cold and pale, his blood barely moving through his veins. Beside him, Siren was silent, her body wrapped around his like she could shield him from death itself. She had taken only what she needed, and yet it was too much. He had given too freely, too fully. Now his heartbeat was slow, fading with every second. Her hands shook as she held him, whispering his name. Again and again, "Eli. Stay." She looked up at the sky, her eyes full of fire and fear. She had fought off the hunters, destroyed the old master, awakened the queen's blood. But now she was about to lose the only soul who had shown her kindness, And the worst part was she had caused it. Her people had told stories about the forbidden bond between human and Sangrean. They called it curse blood. But Siren knew now it was not a curse, it was choice. It was love made real through sacrifice. The markings on her arms began to glow again. Not red this time, but silver and soft. Her blood whispered secrets, ancient power buried deep within the royal line. A final gift left behind by her mother, a blood echo that could be shared. Not taken, given freely just once. She held Eli close, leaned in, and pressed her forehead to his. "I give you what you gave me," she whispered. "A second chance." Her lips touched his, and something ancient flowed between them. Not hunger, not feeding, something pure. Like light through water, Eli gasped, his chest rising, color returning to his face. His eyes fluttered open. Confused, "I was dreaming," he said weakly. "I saw stars. You weren't dreaming." Siren whispered, smiling with tears in her eyes. "You were dying." He looked at her, then down at his own hands. They glowed faintly, silver light pulsing in his veins. "What did you do?" he asked. "I gave you part of me," she said. "Now we're bound by more than blood." Outside, the snow melted where they stood, the warmth of their bond reaching out into the frozen air. Eli sat up slowly, his body stronger than before. Not fully human now, something else, something in between. Siren watched him with quiet awe. "You carry Sangrean fire," she said. "No human has ever done that." He gave her a crook smile. "I've always been full of surprises." Days passed and no shadows came, no ships landed, no hunters crept through the woods. It was as if the old world had vanished the moment Eli and Siren chose a new one. Together, they rebuilt the cabin, not as a hiding place, but as a home. Siren no longer feared the thirst. She no longer feared herself. She drank only when needed, and only from Eli, and he offered it willingly, without fear. The bond between them grew stronger, not just through blood, but through laughter, long talks, quiet mornings. Sometimes they sat by the fire, not speaking, just holding hands, and in those moments, the galaxy felt very far away. One evening, Siren stood outside, her hair shining under moonlight. Eli walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She tilted her head, eyes soft. "About how I was dying of thirst the day we met," she said. "And now?" he asked. She turned to him and smiled. "Now I'm full." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Me too." They stood like that for a long time. Two souls from different stars, no longer hunter and prey, no longer lonely and lost, but something rare, something strong, something worth bleeding for.